Nature does not negotiate. Nature will take a lot of abuse, but in the end, nature will always win. She has showed us time after time. I'm going to tell you about a few times that nature actually showed the human race what they should or should not be doing. Did we learn anything from them? Apparently not. But how about Second World War? We put a small detachment of military on St. Matthew's Island up off of the coast of Alaska. 144 square miles. But if they could not resupply those men, they would starve to death. And so they thought, and they said, well, what we'll do, it's the perfect environment for reindeer. We'll take 29 reindeer, we'll put them there, and if we can't resupply that military detachment, they will have something to eat and they will be able to survive. 1943. Never came the time that they couldn't resupply them. They never had to harvest any of the reindeer. The reindeer were thrilled to death. 29 reindeer, not a predator. It was like reindeer heaven. Those 29 reindeer, by the time they left in 1944, they were happy, fat, and they thought they were in the perfect place for reindeer. They went back and visited those reindeer 20 years later in about 1965. Those 19 reindeer had increased slightly. They had gone from 29 to 6,000. 6,000 fat, happy reindeer. They thought there was nothing in the world better than living on St. Matthew's Island, and so they waved goodbye to the reindeer and left. And 20 years later they came back, and guess what? There was not one live reindeer on St. Matthew's Island. They could not continue to reproduce at the rate they were reproducing and end up with the same area to graze, and what they ended up doing is they ate the island right into the rock, and they all died. And you say, well, that's reindeer. You know, people are smarter than that. People wouldn't do something like that, would they? How about Easter Island? There's not a person in here that has not seen the large carved monuments sitting on the beach of Easter Island. But you know, the amazing thing is, no one lives on Easter Island. At one time, it was a thriving place. They ended up with trees and boats and gardens, and they were living the life of Riley. And the thing about it is, the stature you had on Easter Island was carving the bigger monument and sledding it down to the beach than the person before and standing it up. And every time that would happen, the adulation for that person would be unbounded. Well, there were some stowaways that came to Easter Island, and there were rats. Nobody really cared. The rats were not bothering the human food supply. They were eating the seeds off of the palm trees. The people weren't eating them. They didn't care. They kept chopping down the trees, sledding down the monuments to the beach, standing them up. And all of a sudden they looked around and said, wow, there are no new trees. What happened to the trees? Oh, well, who cares? Let's just do a bigger monument. We'll sled it down. And they cut down the last tree, and they slid the big monument down to the beach, and they stood it up. And without trees, there were no more boats. And without boats, there were no more fish. And then, without the nuts from the palm trees, the rats started eating the human food. And guess what? If we today go to Easter Island and dig up the dump of Easter Island, you know what we find? Human bones with human teeth marks. They ended up with cannibalism because that was the only thing left to eat. And there ended up to be no people left on Easter Island. Why? Why should we not understand that? Why should we not know that nature was showing us exactly what was going on?